Welcome to the Yakima Area Arboretum's 2020 Virtual Garden Tour. With our host, Jeff Ventroba, we want to invite you along as we explore 5 of the Yakima Valley's most intriguing and inspiring gardens.
Hello and welcome to the garden of Rick Main and Kim Brewer. They've been gracious enough to let us do a virtual garden tour with you today. And right now I'm standing in the front of their house in their entryway. This is a really interesting garden for a lot of reasons. One is that it is a Mediterranean garden. The other is a very exposed site that has a lot of limestone, very poor soil, and actually almost no topsoil. So I'm going to take you on a tour today and we're going to talk about what they did, how they embraced that, how they went away from a lot of traditional plantings that people are used to, and how they integrated that into their passion for gardening and their aesthetic and their creativity. So here in the courtyard is a great example. So if you look down, you can see that I'm actually standing on gravel. This is gravel that you can get almost anywhere. And they mixed the texture and size of the gravel. So we have a little bit coarser gravel. And then the fines that come from the driveway go right up to the front of the house, which is a great transition and kind of gives you that continuity of the surface. The other thing that they've done in this courtyard that's so great is they've used planters and plants to kind of frame this. They already have a great entryway, but they brought that out again into the garden so that it gives you that other dimension to the space, using evergreens as well. So you have the pale lavender, and then you have this Alberta spruce that a lot of people don't really think of Mediterranean, but how they have shaped this is pretty fantastic into this kind of rocket shape. And then behind me you see more details of found objects that they have collected along the way, and then they've layered this. So they have a nice grass up here in the front, ornamental grass, and then down here we have succulents and sedums, and this would just illuminates in that morning sun with this eastern exposure. And then across here, another important thing that we really like to see in gardens are courtyard gardens. This is not a traditional courtyard garden, but they've taken this little alcove here and they've created a water feature here. And then they've also pocket planted types of plants that typically would need a lot more protection. And so they can still have those things that they love, like hostas and oak leaf hydrangea, and even Japanese maple. So this Japanese maple, it's a lionhead's maple, is something that you wouldn't think of as planting in an Italianate or a Mediterranean style garden. But here the structure of it really does fit that. It has kind of that windswept look to it. It's also very slow growing, so another excellent choice. And this shape and texture is actually echoed beautifully by this lace leaf elderberry. And so here again, elderberries like rich soil, and we think of them in kind of riparian zones and kind of English style gardens. So what you're able to do is get this beautiful pot here, put in that type of planting soil and potting soil that you would use, and then plant that here to have that same thing. But again, if you take mention of this, and you'll see the purple lace leaf, and you have the green, very similar structure here. So those are the types of things you want to look at. And then the sound of water, of course, is also extremely welcoming and just gives you that rhythm and that audio that we would really love to have, that relaxing feel when you enter a place of residence. So I'm going to show you over here now too in front of the garage. And this is a great solution that a lot of people probably don't think about. And this is something you can do in any garden. Is that a lot of people have these big garages, you come into a garage and it's not always the best visual impact that you would want to have. So by taking a pot, and this could be concrete, here they don't have soil. So they used a pot, and again, this is a porcelain berry vine that is a beautiful variegated, kind of a grape leaf-like shape to the leaf. And then you have these beautiful purple flowers here with almost like a clematis looking, and then they get beautiful berries on them as well. And they've trained this expertly across the front of this to really soften the lines of the doors, and just again gives you that rhythm, gives you that sense of enclosure, and just ties the house back down into the garden. So this is another example as we walk kind of along the southern edge of the house of a pocket garden. So this garden, again, we're repeating the maple because it's really sheltered here. And then we also have things that are really suited to shade. And you think, well, this is a west-facing property in Yakima and blazing heat and a lot of wind from the west, how can they grow this stuff? And so by using these pockets, you can integrate those into your garden. So down here, he has numerous types of heucheras down here, which are great for hummingbirds, gives you a lot of color in those shady spots, and extremely low maintenance and tough as nails as far as a perennial goes. You also have a Ragosa Rose here too, which again, you may not think about so much in this type of a garden, but it works perfectly here. There's that bright, rich green, really lightens up the space. And then on this side, so just, gosh, I'm about 4 feet away from each other, you have a totally different type of garden. And this one is actually in full sun. It does get the wind, it gets all those elements, but yet it's very colorful. And another thing I want you to notice is that a lot of the things in here are really low to the ground. So you're talking about anywhere from ground cover, just a few inches, like the sedum angelique that we have in the front, that at this time of the day, it just glows in that vibrant yellow color. And then down here, even in these gardens, there's things that are just plants you can't live without. So Kim and Rick actually have planted hardy orchids right here, and this is a great plant. And it's actually really hardy as well, and it's just this amazing fuchsia color in the throat too. You can see almost like a cymbidium orchid. And that is something that you can still have in those gardens. So you just have to pick your places that you want to see those things. And obviously this is a high traffic area for them, so they're able to enjoy this frequently. And then you also, if we come around the tree here, and we're back in that garden that is in the full sun and full exposure, and we have the hardy geraniums, and we have this mosaic of the sedums that wind through here. You know, you have kind of your classic hens and chicks here, and you have these other more of a ground cover. And then the sedum angelique, which is one of my personal favorites, it just glows, especially in the evening light. And this is going to evolve and change throughout the season. Here on the corner of the house is this great contorted locust. They actually found this at a Fred Meyer, believe it or not. And this is kind of the prize tree for me on this property. If you kind of look up into the canopy, it looks like it could be on a Mediterranean seascape. It's just beautiful. It's been trained beautifully and pruned beautifully. They spent a lot of time and effort with this. And what this does is, again, it really brings down the house. It connects everything to the landscape. It also, the way they have their trees planted here, it really gives you that sense of enclosure and that sense of entry and exit, which is also really important when you have a landscape. And just in this small area, you have multiple entry points, multiple rooms, and multiple places of visual impact and importance that's separate from each other. So that's another thing to really strive for in your garden, and Kim and Rick have done a beautiful job with that. So as we walk up into this area, you're going to see these dark purple and red barberries here. They're also that same tonality is seen in this cut leaf elderberry. And then behind me, you have the same type of colors repeated over and over again. And what that does is it ties the roof in, of course, because we can all see the beautiful red tile roof, but it also gives you that visual rest, so that you kind of have that negative space that your eyes and your mind can kind of rest and dwell on as you move around the garden. This is another one of Kim and Rick's great found pieces. This table that they had made, it actually is an old water trough, and then they just simply had a piece of steel that was cut to fit the top, and then recycled chairs, which also is just a great feature in a garden. So it's another area of Kim and Rick's garden that is a really fantastic small area that you can apply in your own full sun area. The other thing that is really cool is the structure that they have here. So these are called gabions, and what they are is it's just a wire structure of some kind stuffed with rock of different sizes. They use them on the highway system for retaining walls, but here they've actually made a column out of it, and it gives you that really cool visual impact. And because of the basalt that's on the gravel, it's on the retaining walls, it just really ties in that landscape again. The other thing that's really great about this site are the blocks of limestone. And what they did is actually embrace this. There's no ground here as far as topsoil is concerned. And so when they had to carve this out to make a plateau for the home, they have these big chunks of limestone. Instead of fighting it, they integrated it, and it's just done beautifully. And the softness of the limestone and the color palette with that, contrasting with the dark basalt, just gives you that dynamic, that dynamism that is really cool. And then with the blue, purple lavenders, and even this lush green here, and then this juniper. So you're getting all of those different patterns and textures. The other thing I want to point out here that's just really cool, and I'd like to see more people do this, is they're actually integrating vegetables into their garden. So here we actually have a little stand of rhubarb, and this is a challenging spot for rhubarb. Anything with a big broad leaf is going to be challenging to win, but they've tucked it down in the rocks and with these other structures that really give it some protection, which is a great idea in this type of a garden. So the other great thing about raised beds is you could do raised bed anywhere. The challenge in this location is you've got to know your space. And so you really want to pick things that are going to tolerate your exposure. So obviously hot, dry, windy, and poor soil. So they actually have some really nice raised beds here that they've built, and you have strawberries in the center, and they have a lot of herbs. They have onions growing. And again, herbs do great if they're from the Mediterranean climate. So utilizing those and then letting them go to bloom, the sage and the rosemary, is great for your pollinators again. So you're bringing another element into the garden. So the other thing to think about in your garden is a place for recreation or for play. Kim and Rick have actually done a bocce ball court here, which is really fun and relatively inexpensive. Just raise it up, level it out, and it's filled with gravel. And the other thing they've done that's really integral to this is they have ornamental grasses in front here. And then behind me, we have the Mexican feathergrass, and then they let the native milkweed grow for their butterflies. So it's again a really cool place. Also up here, you kind of have a better view on a bocce ball court in Yakima. Oh, too hard. Whoa! The other thing that's great about having gravel as your ground cover is you can have a fireplace anywhere, a fire pit anywhere. Kim and Rick have done a great job with their fire pit, just using these old recycled metal rings and bounded them together for your fire pit. It gives you a great location, a great view of Selah, and a great time to spend with your family and friends. So this is one of my favorite parts of Kim and Rick's garden. I call it a magnificent mistake. This was their original fire pit, and the limestone blocks that you have here, this was where they would sit, and they planted this Mexican feathergrass here, or Nicella, and they found that it started self-sowing. And instead of actually digging it up and moving it and fighting for the space with the fire pit, they let it grow, and they couldn't have made a better decision. And you look at this feathergrass and how it moves, you can see in the light breeze here, and the red on the tip of the fluorescence really capture that light, and it is also echoed in the barberries that you see planted around here. And you have this beautiful softness, this wavy texture, and then you have the stark stiffness of that dark indigo blue of the lavender, and contrasted with the yucca. It's just brilliant. And then here we have a mock orange, and you kind of think, why is that mock orange going there? I don't think I would think about planting that there. And what that does is it just gives you that cohesion. It gives you that movement as you see that feathergrass as you come into this area, and it just wraps right around here, and you kind of get that embrace of that movement in that grass. So the other thing about Kim and Rick's place that is amazing that they did is they really took the time to think about their view and the vista that they have from their house. And a lot of people don't think that. They think that I just want this blank slate, I want low ground, I don't want anything to obstruct my view. But actually, what you should do is divide that view up and break that view up. It doesn't have to be a huge tree, but using shrubs that are of medium height and some small trees, you really get that. And so behind me, you can see that. So emotionally and visually, it gives your mind something to grab. And then your mind will actually fill in those gaps that are blocked by those trees, but allows you to relax a little bit when you're taking that view in. It just makes a really successful focal point for their garden. The other neat aspect about Kim and Rick's garden is actually certified by the North Yakima Conservation District as a heritage garden. And what that means is they've achieved a certain level of natives and the way they've planted them to bring in native plants and animals to their landscape, and also being water-wise. It's a really cool designation to have for a garden in Yakima. North Yakima Conservation District is a great organization. If you haven't checked them out yet, go on their website. They have a plant sale usually twice a year. So check them out, talk to them. They have a lot of great information about gardening in our climate here in Zone 6 High Desert. So here we have another bed at the west side of Kim and Rick's house in full western exposure, full sun. And this is a great place for pollinators and bees. What they've done here is they've taken a lot of the same plants, which is yarrow, and they've kind of integrated all these different colors. And so they get this really cool effect, almost like a tapestry of plants. And they mix in some other colors too. So we have some salvias, and we have echinops, we have scabiosa and veronicas and geraniums and tickseed. And this is just a great place for wildlife, for birds, for pollinators, for even hummingbirds. It's great right next to their patio, which is in front of me, so they can enjoy that, and outside of their windows as well. So the other thing that Kim and Rick have done really well is they've actually planted their edge of their property, edge of their view with repeating patterns. So you have the different stuff here. You have the lavender, you have sumac, you have rabbit brush, you have Russian sage. You actually have some vines, honeysuckle, which is tough as nails and will do well. The other thing that's cool about this is because it's a western exposure and you have inflorescence and flower spikes like on the lavender, is it gets really beautiful backlight in the evening when it's in full bloom, and you can imagine that purple just becoming almost neon in appearance. The other thing that they've done, as we've talked about, is they've repeated seeding patterns throughout the area, and this is another one on the north side of their property. So again, you can move around your property if it's windy on one side to escape that, but still enjoy being outside and looking at the views, and also just giving you another perspective of those views. So Kim and Rick have also done a really amazing thing with their north side of their yard. They built this really cool little sheltered courtyard that's completely walled in, really private, very intimate. So come on through here and I'll show you. So walking back here and using a courtyard as a way to grow things in a protected location that you wouldn't normally be able to grow. So we talked about all their water-wise plantings, things that are xeric or drought tolerant. And back here, you actually can see some hostas. You see some other things that you really wouldn't be able to have out in that full-on wind. The other thing I love that they do is they repeat throughout their yard, especially with their hardscaping. So again, we have an example of those gabions here, and it's a darker spot as well. So next to the gabion, you actually have this really beautiful lime colored barberry with the Boston ivy with its luscious, just waxy green leaf. Just beautiful contrast for that. Then up here they repeated this, and if you remember the front of the house by the garage, is they did the same type of a treatment. They used a pot over here, and what they did is they actually put a grapevine in the ground here and trained it up over this, and this is Vitis purpura, which isn't grown for the edible grapes. You can't eat them in a soup or a stew type thing, but you grow it for the color. And then the grapes are these little tiny, densely packed, almost waxy looking things that your grandma used to have, those rubbery ones. But the color, the fall color in this is just spectacular. Orange and yellow, scarlet and deep purple. The other thing they did, and I like to see a lot in gardens, is when people grow more than one vine together. And here they have an akiba that's growing up and through this again. So it just gives that other dimension. It gives you another layer of interest throughout that growing season. So the other thing that they've done really well too is they've integrated orange and reddish tones into this space. And so you have this beautiful Boston ivy, which is green, and of course red is its complementary color. So using that reddish orange and those orange tones really enliven the space. They've also used it brilliantly in how they've spaced it out. So it really draws your eye around. You don't need a lot. So at the entryway over here, you come in and you have some geums that are on the ground here with that really brilliant, bright vermilion color. It's repeated in the ones right here that are next to me. You have an orange, just a simple orange cushion on a chair, and then the orange wind chimes. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it just has that really cool visual impact that draws you around into that circular pattern. It just makes your space feel a lot bigger and a lot more welcoming. So we're on the back side of the courtyard that we were just inside of. And I wanted to show you this rhamnus. This is a really cool plant. It's an evergreen, it's columnar, it's good for tight spaces and full sun. You can grow it in a pot. And what they've done here is they've actually just accentuated the backside of this wall of their courtyard. And what that does visually, instead of having a 5-foot wall, it actually extends that wall over 10 feet. And so when you're sitting inside of there, it really has that intimate enclosure that you will feel. The other thing that's great is the movement, and when you look at the top of this and there's a gentle breeze, it just has that beautiful feathery movement in the breeze. Here's another great example of using a found object in your garden and planting it up with perennials that really, again, integrates into Kim and Rick's theme. And again, themes are really important in a garden. And so if you're using found objects, having those things, so if it's old metal, you kind of stick to that, and then you repeat it throughout the garden. This is just a steel trough that was a found object. They put in a dwarf ajuga in here, as well as about 3 different kinds of creeping sedums, and then also a semi-hardy succulent that they probably will lift and bring inside. But again, another great example of how you can use a found object in your garden to make a beautiful statement and sometimes a more difficult situation to plant in. So we're at the top of their property, and this place is actually very exciting to me. This was kind of literally a back-breaking endeavor for Kim and Rick. And what this is actually the scar that they cut out to build the house on. And what they've chosen to do here, which I think is genius, is they've just pretty much used natives. And they've been working on getting those established. And if you look closely, you can see those starts. One thing about natives that's kind of interesting is you'd think that they would be really quick to take off, really easy to establish, but it's almost further from the truth. You still have to baby them along for those first few years. But again, once this all fills in, you can imagine the habitat that this is going to create in this area. And then down below, we have a little bit of taller things. We have some native sumac. So, I'm going to be actually walking in the canopy of those sumac. And in the fall, when they turn their brilliant scarlet colors, and being able to look down and look across at their house, it's going to be quite spectacular. And then down below, you have another little seating area as well. What this does too is that, again, it creates kind of a bowl effect, and they did that with large machinery, but you can also repeat this kind of a style and pattern in your own garden with different types of trees, different sizes, even if you're not on a hillside. The other thing that's challenging here is this rock wall. What they did is, because this is cliche and just kind of limestone, and when it rains hard, it creates this like the slurry of mud that will rush down here. And so this looks like a retaining wall. This is actually more of a swale. It's actually been backfilled by the rain and by the soil and the erosion that has occurred. So again, once these native grasses and rabbit brush and even a little bit of lavender in here, the sumac, once that all really fills in, you're just going to have the stabilization of your slope, and you're going to have a beautiful tapestry for native wildlife in your garden. So now I'm at the bottom of that slope that I was just walking along, and I'm in a really protected seating area here. So if the wind is blowing, you're protected by the house. From the east, you're protected by the slope. But kind of the star of this area is this contorted willow that's behind me. And what they've done is they've taken a relatively common tree to our area, and actually in the whole Intermountain West, and they've pruned it to kind of fit the style of their garden. So it looks really Mediterranean or Italianate in the landscape. Also, they have then repeated patterns throughout here, again, using evergreens like junipers that are columnar in nature, native willows, mock orange, things that we've seen as we've toured around the rest of the garden. And then they've layered it even down to the ground, where they've just laid these kind of rivers of basalt rock that they've used repeatedly throughout the garden to give that cohesive and artistic feel to their yard. Even the plantings of perennials, again, the color palettes, how they've arranged them in height and is really consistent with the entire garden. And that's what you want. You want a cohesiveness that allows you to emotionally and visually tour around the garden and really feel a part of your landscape when you're inside the house, when you're outside of the house, when you're entertaining in all the different rooms around the garden. And Kim and Rick have just done a brilliant job of that as a whole. So I'm here with the garden owners, Kim and Rick, and thank you so much for having us out for this virtual garden tour. It's the first time we've done this, and we appreciate your patience and inviting us into your home and garden. Some of the things I wanted to ask you, the first thing is what was your inspiration for this garden? It's fantastic. You guys have done this beautiful Mediterranean landscape, and I know your past history was kind of a verdant, lush type of a garden, and so I know this is a big transition for you. So what was your inspiration, and how old is the garden?
Well, the first question was that our trip to Greece was 4.5 weeks in Greece, and it was probably maybe 15 years ago. And at the time, we were just taking the time to enjoy a getaway, but on the way back, after we got home, we came across the land with our daughter's help. She was looking for land to invest in, and So we decided to make a change from our Yakima address to something on the hillside. So.
Yeah. Nate, and was the transition, the style of gardening difficult? Was that a difficult decision for you guys to make?
Lots of mistakes.
Yeah.
Things that we kind of committed to doing dry gardening,
Okay.
but there were things that we didn't want to let go of from the other one, so we went ahead and tried it,
Right.
and they lasted about a year.
Okay.
We had ferns growing in the corner over
Yeah,
there.
it was-
Yeah, didn't do it. Yeah.
So we just really had to kind of switch our mindset,
Yeah.
start looking at places online and things with heat resistant,
Sure.
especially with the gravel around the house. It holds the heat for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's got to be something that can kind of handle that.
Yeah. I've noticed you've had some kind of borderline hardy plants for our Zone 6 garden, and they obviously are doing fantastic in your garden and have perennialized in your garden. So I'm sure that contributes to that, having that gravel as a heat sink for you too.
The other thing, when one of the islands we were on was Naxos, and in one of the bookstores we picked up a book called Growing a Garden on a Greek Hillside.
Oh wow.
And at the point, again, we weren't interested in buying or selling or building anything. But years later, when I showed him this property, he's the one that said, you know, we could have our Greek home on a hillside,
Yeah.
right here in Yakima.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And that was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Probably 14 or 15 now.
Yeah.
We've been here 13.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
And one of the things too is that we did kind of grab some of the ideas from other types of gardening.
Sure.
Like in England, they go from really controlled to wild.
Right.
So we tried to do the same thing where towards the house, there's more things that need to have maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
But as you move away from the house, it goes into the
Sagebrush.
Yeah, the
sagebrush,
native
plants
landscape.
and things.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I tried to kind of use that concept
Sure.
to kind of negotiate the two things.
Yeah, well, I think it's
to
worked
work.
brilliantly. It really has. Yeah, yeah. Do you spend a lot of time in the garden? I mean, is it something that you guys still enjoy doing?
We are, and being 10 years older than Rick, my energy level is starting to poop out a little
Sure.
bit. And so I love when I'm out here.
Right.
And it's my only form of exercise, basically, other than walking. So it contributes to my health and well-being, I think, just having some fresh air and exercise.
And then with me, I have summers off.
There you go.
So when he goes to work, he usually leaves around 6, and I go out and I work till about 1.
Great.
Then I go in.
Nice. Do you find yourself using all the different seating areas? I mean, I think you have about 6 or 7. Do you kind of migrate around the property? Do you have your favorite places that you like to sit?
We do, depends on whether we're just the two of us or a couple maybe, but if there's a big group, we use the big round table.
Sure.
Which was a horse trough at one time,
Yeah.
and now we converted it to a table. But we tend to use this in the mornings. Sometimes in the afternoons, if it's too hot, we'll sit in there in the shade.
Nice.
And then our sunset area that's out right on the bluff with the seats.
Right.
That's a favorite place. Usually
Sure.
we'll have a glass of wine and watch the sunset. I mean, we've got Rainier and we've got Adams and we've got Clemens and just amazing sunsets.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for having us out here. It was great. Thanks for supporting the Yakima Area Arboretum. We appreciate your time and your garden. You've done a beautiful job, and we look forward to seeing the garden grow in the years to come.
Well, thank you. We believe in the Arboretum, and especially at this time with everything going on, this truly is therapy.
Yes.
You know, for enjoying the time alone and enjoying the time sharing it. So thanks for asking.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's very good.